Our next speaker is Kate Gregson, who's giving a 30-minute talk in Strand 2. And Kate is an independent ELT consultant, a teacher educator and teacher. She's worked in numerous countries and contexts around the world and is now living in France. She has a special interest in curriculum and remote teacher training and development as well. And she's joint publications editor for the IATEFL YLTSIG. Now, during Kate's talk, we recommend that you watch it in speaker view. And if you have any questions, please type them in the Q&A box. So take it away, Kate. Please share your screen.
Okay, thank you very much, Lou. Allow me to just share my screen. Here we go. Okay, is that okay? Can you see that, Lou?
Perfect.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much for your introduction there. And I'm just very proud and delighted to be here today to talk at the IATEFL YLTSIG web conference for 2021. I'm really looking forward to the sessions that we've got here. We're having here this weekend, to some inspirational talks and sessions from different speakers. And thank you everyone for attending and coming along today. I see lots of familiar names, even if I can't see your faces, so that's wonderful. And nice to see you, Patty, from your previous talk. It was very fascinating, thank you. So let me make a start today. I'd like to talk to you with my my teacher educator hat on, my trainer hat, about how we can use the primary learner's voice for reflective practice for our own teacher development. I'm doing this based on my own experience as a teacher educator, and on the kind of interactions and the work that I've done with teachers in that role with young learner teachers over my time as a teacher educator. So let's get started. Okay, so in today's talk, there are two main parts to my talk. In the first part, I'd like to think about the different needs that we take into account in teacher development. And I just want to emphasize that we can also use the child's needs within in order to support our teacher development, and that in fact the child has a human right to express their voice. And also, as part of a learner-centered teaching approach, we have the child at the center of that approach. So we should, well, listen to what they have to say. I'd like to think about the benefits of doing this to the child and to the teacher. And then in the second part of my talk, I am going to talk about the more practical sides. How are we going to actually go about doing this? So thinking about reflective practice, the reflective learning cycle, and some of the techniques we can use to actually to hear that child's voice. So these will be to do with questioning, feedback and formative assessment. Okay, so when we think about teacher learning, teacher development, we need to think about the different stakeholder needs that inform the choices that we make, the strategies that we use, and the direction in which we are going. What are we going to learn as teachers? I've put a number of different strategies here, different activities that you can do. We have the COP tag PLN is Community of Practice, Teacher Action Activity Group and Professional Learning Network. These are groups, teacher groups. We have mentoring, reflective practice, coaching, attending conferences as you're doing today. And then different kinds of training, which may be compulsory or they may be voluntary. And of course, action research and classroom investigation. So these kinds of activities can be more on the bottom-up side of things, which is where They are informed by or guided by the teacher's own perceived needs. So, for example, the mentoring, the reflective practice, the coaching, and other activities that are guided by the teacher in the direction they would like to go in. Or they could be more top down, so they're imposed by somebody else. Somebody else is deciding what it is you're going to learn as a teacher. So it could be to do with your institution, or it could be to do with a national need. Excuse me. So, for example, if you have a new curriculum in your country, then perhaps you will receive training on induction training for that new curriculum, or a new course in your institution. You will have some kind of probably compulsory training. However, although the learner's needs are in there for sure, they are definitely within those bottom-up and top-down directions, we don't really seem to think that carefully about where exactly are those learners' needs, where are they and what are they doing in there, and how are we going to find out about what the learner really needs for us to do, or ways in which we can develop as teachers to meet their needs better. Okay, and this is what I would like to talk about today. So when we consider the child's voice, this is actually a human right to have children express their voice. And as Gail and Nai have mentioned in their chapter in forthcoming book, the children should be seen as beings. They are individuals of their own right. They're not just adults in the making. They are actual beings with their own rights, their own views, their own opinions, and we should see them as such and listen to those views and opinions. And in fact, the UN Convention for the Rights of the Child, which was ratified in 1989, so quite some time ago now. It has a number of articles. I can't remember how many it is, 20 something perhaps. And 4 of these articles are seen as guiding principles to this convention. So we have the non-discrimination, the best interest of the child, the right to life, survival and development. And then this is the one we're dealing with today, which is the right to be heard. And that is Article 12. And taking into account this human right has wider implications for educational practices in general, as Gail Ellis and Nai Ibrahim remind us. And I would say that that most certainly includes teacher education. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. So modern approaches to teaching and learning advocate a learner-centered approach. And this implies that instruction encourages the learners to be active participants of their learning. It is active learning. They are not passive in the learning process. It is interactive. So the children are collaborating with their peers and with the teacher, and in fact with the knowledge itself. And the children should be a responsible participants in their own learning. Weimar reminds us that there are 5 characteristics of learner-centered teaching. So the first one is that it engages students in the hard, messy work of learning. I love this expression. So basically, it means that it's the student's job to do the learning. It's not the teacher who is doing the learning for the students. The teacher is there to support the students as they do the learning. And part of this support is giving them the skills to do this. So it includes explicit skill instruction. It's not just about the transmission of knowledge, as I'm sure we're all aware. It also encourages students to reflect on what they are learning and how they are learning it. It motivates them by giving them control. over the learning processes. And it encourages collaboration and views the classroom as a community of learners. And it's really these final 3 points that I would like to focus on, and that I really feel this is where the student's voice comes directly into learner-centered teaching. This is what we are really trying to do when we find out and hear the student's voice. Okay, let's move on. So in terms of benefits then, there are benefits all round to hearing the children's voice. So first, let's consider the benefits to the child. So here we can see in the picture the youth, the children are raising their voice to be heard, and it is their human right to do so, as we have just seen. Not only this, it develops all sorts of skills that are really vital for child development throughout the primary level and beyond and below as well. So these are critical thinking skills. Children reflect on and articulate their thinking and their opinions about their learning. They develop self-awareness, independence, and learning skills. So they learn to be better and independent learners who will be able to stand on their own 2 feet when the teacher is not with them anymore. It also gives the learners a sense of agency. So Mercer defines this as the belief that their behavior can make a difference to their learning in that setting. And this actually relates directly back, let me just go back, to point 4 there, motivating students by giving them control over the learning process. So this is a real key tenet of learner-centered teaching. And then the last 2 points are related really to the whole school development. So through doing this, the students, they engage with one another, they share their opinions and their evaluations on the teaching and learning in their context. And this really develops a sense of community, in the classroom as a group, and also in the whole wider school as well. And through this, the children can develop empathy and listening skills. Okay, so then if we move to the teacher, this can also benefit the teacher in a number of ways. And in particular, this can give us information for developing ourselves as teachers. So here we have the children still raising the voice of youth. And now we think about the benefits to the teacher. So they can gain deeper understanding of the teaching and learning process, in that they can hear the students' opinions on the teaching and learning that is going on, and they can gain a clearer understanding of what it is that's important to those students and how they learn best. And this allows us to get input or data for reflection, and that data, that input, is really highly specific to the context in which the teachers are working. So it's really, it's 100% relevant to that individual in their classroom with their learners. So it's very much a bottom-up CPD activity. It's driven within the teacher's own needs and within the teacher's own context. It gives us formative assessment, formative information, which allows us to better understand and address the children's learning needs. So we find out more about their needs, and we can modify our practice in order to support them better in their learning, to really meet their needs much more carefully. And in a slightly different perspective, it changes the way that teachers think about their students and their learning. Some research has been done. I'm sorry, I forgot to write down the name, it's terrible of me. So that the teachers find that they feel closer to their students, and that they really think about their pupils in a very different way. It helps them to really understand their students better. And again, going back to that idea of treating the children as beings, not just as little adults in the making. Okay, if we move on. Okay, so how can this contribute to our professional development? So as we know, reflective practice is a really important tool for professional development. By reflective practice, I mean where a teacher takes action in the classroom. He teaches a lesson and then you step back and you think about what you have been doing and some of the strengths of your teaching, some of the areas you could improve. The reflection is going on within the teacher. We'll look a little bit more at that process in just a moment. Generally speaking, when we think about reflective practice for PD, we consider more what I would call teacher-generated data. So we use information from observation. It may be observation by the teacher themselves, so self-observation. It might be asking a peer, another teacher, to come and observe your class and watch something in particular in your lesson, or it could be a supervisor or a manager or a trainer even, who will come and observe your class and say and give you feedback on a particular area that you would like to develop. It could be done through reflective journaling. So this is where at the end of the class you reflect on your teaching and you write in a journal, which you then develop over time and come back to and analyze later on. That's the key point. It could be done through critical incidents. Those are particular events that happen in a class, reflecting on why it happened or what happened, why it might have happened, and how the problem was addressed in reality and how it could have been addressed. Or it may be self-evaluation. In fact, all of those are self-evaluation of teaching. And I would like to argue that in addition to that teacher-generated data, we also need to include the learner-generated data, the child's voice. So how can we do that? Some of you may have seen this diagram before. This is Kolb's reflective learning cycle, or the experiential learning cycle. And it describes how we can learn through reflection on our experiences by actively trying out new ideas or making changes and trying out modifications to our teaching. And we do all of this based on the data that we gathered from the reflection. So either the teacher-generated data usually, and here I'm going to think about the learner-generated data. So there are 4 stages to the cycle. It's an ongoing process. So and there's no starting point, but if we nominally say at the top, we start with the concrete experience, which is the doing or the having of the experience. We then reflect on that. So we review and reflect on that experience. The next stage, we think about what has happened, we make conclusions, and we try to learn from that experience and plan what we can do to improve our practice. So then we do it. And then it moves back to the beginning of that cycle where we reflect again. We experience the adapted practice, reflect on it, and so on, and so it goes on and on and on. And I would like to suggest that we can incorporate that learner-generated data, the learner's voice, into those first two stages on the list there, the concrete experience stage and the reflective observation stage. Okay, so we can really use the learner's voice to help us to improve our practice and to develop through reflective practice. Okay, so I'm going to think of a few ways that we could do this, and they're largely to do with questioning, feedback, and formative assessment. So we can get information from our learners by asking the questions, seeking the feedback for formative purposes. We might do this as part of our regular classroom practice, using what we call on-the-run assessment, which are where we gather information as we teach a class regularly, informally, all the time, in fact, to find out how well our students are progressing and how well they have assimilated the new language. So we might do this with quick scans, where they just raise the hand and you just count how many students there are saying yes or no. It could be traffic lights. These are, each student has a red card, an orange card, a green card. You ask your question, and if it's green for go is great, red is problem, and orange is not great, but probably okay. Or we might do this simply by monitoring. We might use the results from other kinds of assessment as well. So more planned assessment. It could be any different kind of assessment, the self, the peer. It might be formal even, or it could be informal. We could also use simple questionnaires or surveys, which I will talk about in a moment. Or you could seek feedback from other stakeholders, the key stakeholders in the teaching learning, the parents, other teachers who teach the same subject or the same class as you. So let's just quickly look at questioning then. The first questioning technique, I think probably a lot of people know this already, is the think, pair, share question. So for example, you ask, what did you enjoy most in this unit? You ask your question, you give time for note-taking and thinking, individual note-taking and thinking, then they articulate their ideas in pairs, and then they share, and you discuss the answers all together. You could have you can do surveys, you can do standard surveys where you ask a load of questions and they reply, or you could do them in a slightly different way so that they're a bit more fun or perhaps collaborative. For example, you could have all the students list the activities that they enjoyed, and they write them on the board, or you write them on the board, and then they come up and then they stick a number or tick next to the activities they enjoyed. And then you discuss the results as a class and you ask them to justify their ideas. You can ask questions which support a growth mindset, very important. For example, my classic question, what do you know now that you didn't know before? So really emphasizing that kind of incremental learning and identifying where those increments are and where those steps are that they are taking in their learning. You can ask evaluative questions about the teacher and the teaching. So there's 3 questions there, for example. I personally like the last one. Do you ever think, oh no, when I ask you to do an activity, tell me about it? So you're asking, although it is a little negative, I have to admit, I quite like that activity, that question. It brings out quite a lot of interesting answers. Some more formative feedback tools. Just check the time. Okay. So you can use visual techniques. You could ask for a visual reflection or self-assessment sheet where you have a little cup and some criteria or a statement, and they have to say how much they agree it by shading in a lot in the cup or just a little bit at the bottom, or the simple smileys. They draw a smiley for how happy they feel, how confident they feel, how much they gained from an activity. You could use mime or visualization, so asking them to mime jumping for joy or feeling a bit sleepy, or ask them to draw a picture of their facial expressions, happy, nervous, confused, or whatever. You could facilitate storytelling or narrative session. So if I grew up to be an English teacher, I would or something a little bit more simple. You could ask them to write a story with the main character as a student in your class. You could use KWL charts as a little example at the top there, where when you begin a topic, the students write what they know about or brainstorm what they know about it already. They ask questions. So what do you wonder? That's the W. What do they want to know? And then at the end, they reflect on what they have learned. And you can then use that to focus on how the extent to which their needs have been met and what they still would like to know, what hasn't actually been answered for them. You can use focus groups. It's a more, you have a class representative or representatives in a class council. So you just meet a few members of your class and you can discuss the teaching and learning in the class. We can see a suggestion box here. You can use them for anonymous tips or suggestions. An online alternative is a cyber cafe, where you can have students come and discuss at a certain time every week, and they can discuss their teaching and learning or ask questions, and they could just drop in and have a cafe or a Coke or a glass of orange juice perhaps, or water. And the last example I want to tell you is the insight matrix. I'm just checking the time. Running very tight on time, so I'm just going to whiz you through the insight matrix, where you give post-it notes to the learners and you ask them to write. It's similar to what I said before. They ask them to write the activities they would like or have participated in, they enjoyed participating in. You draw the matrix on the board, and you ask the students to think what the X and Y axes are. So in this example, you have fun and boring, learned a lot, learned a little. But you can vary those. You get them to put their post-it notes together on the board, and then you read each one out in turn and ask them, where do you want to put it on the matrix? If you have a large class, you could have learners do this in groups. And then you discuss the matrix with the class, and you can take notes on the board, or really useful, take a photo of it so that you can reflect on it later and use it for your own professional development. And this is based on an idea which is used in teacher training, called the insight matrix. So in this way then, we can use learner-generated data, responses to questioning, feedback, information and findings from formative assessment to go into our reflective cycle and help us develop our practice with both the learner and the teacher as the winners of that process. So I'm just going to close with some tips. So keep it simple. Make sure your questions are really clear, specific, and not leading. So be careful that children are not just giving you the answer that they think you want them to give you. It's quite common with younger learners that they want to please the teacher, or they think they should say what they say what they think they should say, not really what they actually feel. So over time, you know, with support and with encouragement, you can have children be a little bit more open about their actual ideas. Always focus on positive, not negative. What are you most proud of? What do you dislike? Check for hidden messages or the implications of what you are saying. If you say if something is difficult, is that a bad thing? Is difficult perhaps not a challenge and therefore something good? Is easy good? Just be careful how you express your questions and what you imply when you ask them. You can use children's own language or allow them to use their own language as required. And this will give you a much richer source and much richer data, and will let the children express themselves much more clearly and deeply and in more detail. And the last tip here is to ask fewer questions at a time, but ask them more often. So rather than wait till the end of a unit or the end of a course to get some feedback in a big summative survey, do it regularly. Ask 2 or 3 questions a week. You could even make it a regular feature of your classroom, depending on whether you teach them every day or if you are in a language school context, perhaps once a week. Just ask a couple of questions each week or each lesson.
Thank you very, very much, Kate.
Okay.
That was great, and just I think a really interesting approach in terms of incorporating the child's voice into into the CPD and how it can be beneficial for all, but particularly there with really great practical tips that I think we can all take away and incorporate into the classroom, hopefully. So a very big thank you to you for that.
Okay.